Tonight's stories come from people who worked when most of the world was asleep. Night shifts are supposed to be quiet, boring even. But there's something about empty buildings, locked doors, and fluorescent lights that makes every sound feel louder, and every stranger feel closer. These accounts were shared online and have been rewritten for narration. If you're listening alone, keep the volume low. And if you're working the night shift right now, just remember to check behind you. I used to work the overnight shift at a small roadside hotel, the kind with faded carpet, dim lobby lights, and a front desk bell that sounded louder at 3 a.m. than it did during the day. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights were dead. A few late check-ins, maybe someone asking for extra towels, and that was it. One night around 11:20, a man buzzed the locked front doors. Mid-40s, baseball cap pulled low, a backpack slung over one shoulder. He smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes and asked for a room. Nothing unusual, until he insisted on paying in cash, but wanted me to run a card first to prove the system works. I told him it didn't matter. Cash was fine. He stared at my hands as I counted it, like he was memorizing how I moved. I handed him a key card and watched him walk toward the elevator. About an hour later, I glanced at the camera feed. The elevator never opened on the second floor. It opened on the first. He stepped out, then wandered the hallway like he forgot where his room was. He stopped at a guest room door, leaned close like he was listening, then moved on. I pulled up the room list to reassure myself he was a guest. That's when my stomach dropped. The room I'd assigned was still marked vacant. No payment, no check-in, no name. Like the last hour had been a dream. I checked the key card log. No entry for that room. Not once. I looked up at the lobby and saw him sitting on the couch, facing the TV that wasn't on. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't asleep. He was just sitting, still, upright, waiting. When I stood up behind the desk, his head turned slowly, tracking me. I walked over and asked if he needed help finding his room. He said softly, "I'm fine. I just like to see who comes in late." Then he smiled again. My instincts were screaming, but I didn't have proof. I went back behind the desk and called my manager. She told me to watch him and call police if he did anything threatening. That made me feel worse, because just being watched like that already felt threatening. Around 2:30 a.m., a guest buzzed in. The man's eyes followed the guest across the lobby like he was counting steps. The guest disappeared down the hall. The man stood up almost immediately and walked in the same direction, slow and casual, like he belonged. I pulled up the hallway camera and saw him stop outside the guest's door. He didn't knock. He just stood there, close to the door frame, head tilted, listening. That was enough. I called 911 and told them there was someone inside the hotel who wasn't in the system and was standing outside occupied rooms. While I was still on the phone, he walked back to the lobby and leaned over the counter. "Do you have food?" he asked. His voice was low and calm, like he was asking for directions. I told him we had vending machines. He stared at me for a second too long and said, "You're here alone, right?" 2 officers arrived about 10 minutes later. They asked for his ID. He hesitated, then handed them a card that looked laminated at home. The officers exchanged a look. They walked him outside. One officer came back and told me he wasn't checked in because his payment was counterfeit. The backpack he carried? Empty. No clothes, no toiletries, nothing that said, "I'm staying here." He was trespassed and taken away. When the sun came up, I reviewed the footage one last time. The part that still makes me sick is how comfortable he looked wandering the halls. Like he'd done it before. Like he was searching for the right door at the right moment. I quit 2 weeks later, and even now, whenever I hear a desk bell, my body tenses up before my brain catches up. I worked nights at a small gas station just outside town, the kind where the fluorescent lights buzz and the parking lot feels like a black ocean after midnight. I liked it because it was predictable. Truckers, tired commuters, the occasional college kid buying energy drinks at 1 a.m. Then a man started showing up. The first time, he walked in at 12:47. Mid-40s, weathered jacket, calm expression. He didn't buy anything. He just stood near the counter long enough for the silence to become awkward. I asked if he needed help. He said, "You always work the late shift." It wasn't a question. I gave a polite laugh and said, "Yeah, most nights." He nodded like he was confirming something he already knew. Then he looked at the whiteboard behind me where I'd written the weekly coffee special in my messy handwriting. He smiled slightly and said, "You cross your T's really hard." I froze. I didn't wear a name tag. We didn't have uniforms. There was nothing about me on display except my face and that handwriting. He finally bought a bottle of water, paid in cash, and left. I tried to shake it off, but he came back 2 nights later. Same time window, same calmness. This time he leaned closer and said, "Your coworker leaves at 11 on Sundays. That must be when you feel safest." That comment sent a cold wave through me. We did have a coworker who covered the first part of Sunday nights. But customers didn't know that. Regulars didn't know that. Only someone paying attention would know. I started locking the back room door. I kept my phone on the counter. I checked the cameras every few minutes, even though the camera system was outdated and grainy. A week passed without him, and I started to relax. Then I came back from a 5-minute bathroom break and found something on the counter. A receipt. Not from our store. A receipt from a grocery place across town. On it, someone had circled the date and written in tiny letters, "You were there at 6:12. I was there at 6:12, earlier that day, buying cat litter. I hadn't told anyone I even owned a cat. That night when he came in, I didn't do small talk. I told him to leave. He looked genuinely disappointed, like I'd broken a promise. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "I'm just noticing." I told him noticing was one thing and tracking was another. I told him I'd call the police. He nodded slowly and said, "Would it make you feel better if I smiled more?" People like smiles. Then he looked down at my hands and added, "You keep your keys between your fingers when you walk outside? Smart." I didn't realize I was doing that until he said it. I dialed 911 right in front of him. He didn't flinch. He just stood there and watched me like he was curious how long it would take for help to arrive. When officers came, they searched his car. In the back seat was a notebook. My name was written across multiple pages, not in a romantic way, in a practiced way. Like he'd been repeating it until it looked right. They found timestamps, notes about what I wore, which nights I worked alone, and the exact times deliveries arrived. He kept telling the officers, "I'm not a bad person, I just pay attention." I transferred locations the following week. Different town, different hours, different routine. But even now, when I see a car idling with its headlights off in a parking lot, my skin prickles. Because I learned the hard way that some people don't notice. They study. I was 2 months into my overnight job at a 24-hour convenience store when it happened. It was the kind of place that looked normal during the day but felt exposed at night. Big windows, bright interior, and a parking lot that turned into a silent, empty stage after midnight. Around 2:10 a.m., I noticed a car parked at the far end of the lot. Its lights were off, but the engine was running. I couldn't see it from the register unless I leaned to the side, and that made me uncomfortable immediately. People who want to be seen park close. People who don't. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was a delivery driver waiting for an order. But 20 minutes passed, then 40. No one came in, no phone notifications, no orders. At 3 a.m., 2 customers showed up for coffee. 2 guys, loud but friendly, the kind of people you're grateful for at night because the store doesn't feel empty. They joked around and stayed near the entrance for a bit, talking. One of them glanced out and said, "That car been there the whole time?" I said yes. He made a face and said, "Weird, no plates." I leaned to look again, and my stomach tightened. He was right. The car didn't have a license plate, not even a temporary tag. The guys stepped outside to smoke, and I watched through the window. The car didn't move, but I could tell someone was inside because a small screen glow pulsed occasionally, like a phone being checked. After a few minutes, one of the guys walked closer to the car and raised his hand as if asking, "You good?" I couldn't hear what was said, but I watched the driver's head turn sharply toward him. The guy backed up, then laughed as if trying to make it casual. The car suddenly reversed fast and rolled out of the lot. Before I could breathe, a second car pulled in, also with its lights off, also new, also no plates. It stayed only long enough for the first car to pass by the entrance. Then it followed it out, like it was connected by a string. The guys came back inside. Their smiles were gone. One of them said, "Yeah, that wasn't DoorDash." He didn't explain further, but he didn't have to. The entire energy had changed, like we'd all felt the same thing and didn't want to say it out loud. Nothing happened for the rest of that shift, but I didn't relax once. Every sound outside made me look up. Every time the door chimed, my heart jumped. The next night, I told myself I was being paranoid. Surely it was some weird coincidence. At 2:58 a.m., the car came back. Same spot, engine running, lights off. This time, a group of customers walked in and asked me, "Is that your car out there? The one with no plates?" When I said no, their faces tightened. One of them said they'd seen 2 people inside arguing, pointing at the store, pointing at the doors. They offered to stay for a few minutes. I pretended I was calm, but I was shaking so hard my hands didn't feel like mine. After about 20 minutes, the car backed out slowly and drove away. No headlights, like it didn't want to be remembered. When my shift ended, I didn't walk to my car alone. I waited until a morning commuter came in for coffee and asked if they could watch me walk outside. I quit a week later. Not because anything happened, but because something almost did. And that was worse. The only thing that kept replaying in my head was how the car always chose the same place, the blind spot, like it knew exactly what it needed, like it had practiced. I worked nights at a small family-run motel in a rural area. 2 floors, maybe 25 rooms, and a lobby that felt too big when you were the only one awake. After midnight, the front doors were supposed to stay locked. Guests used key cards to get in, and anyone else had to ring the little desk bell. Most nights, I sat in the back office. There was a speaker that would ding whenever the bell was pressed, so I could relax in the back and only come out when someone needed something. One cold Tuesday around 2 a.m., the bell dinged. I walked out to the lobby, empty. I checked the doors, locked. No one outside. I went back to the office, slightly annoyed. 10 minutes later, the bell dinged again. I walked out again, still empty, still locked. The parking lot was quiet. This happened 4 times. Each time, the bell sounded clear, like someone was pressing it with intent. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a vibration. It was the bell. So I decided to stay at the front desk and wait. If someone was messing with me, I wanted to see them. I dimmed the lobby lights and sat with my eyes on the bell. Minutes passed. The building creaked. The heater clicked. My eyelids got heavy. Then it happened again. The bell rang, and I saw a hand press it. A pale hand rose slowly from beneath the desk, fingers curled like it was testing the air. It pressed the bell with the calmest motion I've ever seen. No rushing, no panic, just deliberate. I jumped back so hard my chair scraped the floor. My body moved before my brain could form words. I ran to the back office, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I pulled up the security camera feed. The lobby camera showed the desk, the bell, the empty chair I'd abandoned, and movement below the counter. A head lifted into view, just enough for the camera to catch the outline and the shine of eyes. He was smiling. He crawled out slowly like he wasn't worried about time. He stood up, tall, hunched shoulders, hood pulled forward, and looked around the lobby as if he was deciding what to do next. Then he walked toward the hallway that led to the back office. I pressed my back against the door. The handle rattled once, slowly, then again. Not frantic, not aggressive, just patient. I whispered to the 911 dispatcher that someone was inside and trying the back office door. She told me officers were on the way. Through the camera feed, I watched him stop outside the hallway, as if listening. Then he walked back into the lobby, almost casually, and stood by the front doors. It hit me then. He wasn't trapped. A minute later, headlights washed across the parking lot camera. Police. The man bolted out of frame. I heard the front doors open, then footsteps, shouting, and silence. When officers cleared the building, they didn't find him. They did find something else, a rock wedged near the front door, something that would keep it from fully locking, meaning he could have slipped in quietly at any time. The officer asked me if I'd noticed anything else odd on previous nights. I told him no. But that wasn't true. Sometimes when I was in the back office, the bell would ding once and stop. I'd always assumed it was a guest bumping it by accident or the speaker being weird. Now I know what it was. He was testing if I'd come out, seeing how fast I responded, learning the rhythm of my shift. I never worked another night there again. And even now, whenever I hear a small bell ring, I don't think of service. I think of that pale hand rising from the dark, calmly pressing the bell like it owned the place. That's all for tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, consider subscribing. New videos are on the way. And to everyone working while the rest of the world sleeps, stay alert. Trust your gut. And don't ignore the feeling that something isn't right. Good night.